So we're here to solve this Skyscrapers variation by JinHoo on. Just to get myself a bed of choices for this video, I'm going to go to the tab menu and turn on Surface, Sudoku Normal, Sudoku Center. For a lot of you, probably just Normal and Center are the two that will be useful to have on, and you can get those just from the Sudoku solving option and clicking through these options. But for me, I want to be able to do a little bit of coloring of these outside clues to help visualize spaces. One of the things for this whole week, as you consider the variations on puzzles that JinHoo gives us, is what do the new rules imply? Where should I really start to look? The Haido rules for skyscrapers really impact the cells just next to these visible clues as a starting point. And how do they do that? Well, a clue like these two on the outside say that a building that is seen by these clues in this column is a 2 building. And if a 2 building is in them, if we had a larger number like a 3, 4, or 5, that would instantly be hiding a 2 behind it. And so there are ways for each of these clues. You can start actually quickly by just saying that the kinds of numbers that can go into them are limited to the digits that are the same size or smaller than the numbers that go in. And a few things will pop out when you just look at these cells as we've marked. The first is that with these 2 cells in the upper left, marked as 1 and 2, we actually get a constraint on this far right side that there's only 1 digit left really for the cell. It's a 3. There's no other value that can go in there, and that's effectively the eliminations from the left force a first digit here. And it actually then has constraints that will play out around it, which are, for instance, that this cell down here is now going to need to be small, but have a 3 somewhere in its next few cells. It can't be all the way on the far right. Another thing we'll do is if we look in this column, it's certainly the case that the 2 big buildings, the 4 and the 5, are in the 2nd and 5th rows. And this actually now gives us back a real place to make progress, which is to look to this clue on the outside of the grid. And that's to say that it's going to see this first building for sure, it's going to see a 4 or a 5, and it then may see another very big building. But if it's going to see a 2, it's got to be seeing a building in that first space. And so quick way to make progress in this grid is to recognize that the 2 goes in this upper leftmost cell. It now actually forces a constraint right in the column next door that if a 1 is seen, but a 2 building is seen in this column, the 2 must be absolutely in the next cell that's coming out. If it weren't in this cell, a bigger building would be in that cell and be hiding the 2 behind it. So we can mark that 2 in. That puts in a 1 over on this far right side. Notice that, again, a 3 building must be seen in this row, so if the 1 and 2 placed, the 3 must be in the next cell so that the 3 is seen from the right side of the grid, and we end up with 4, 5, 4, 5 coming around to these spaces. The next way that we can be making progress in the grid is going to be thinking through some of the constraints on potentially these 3s on the left. I think this is one of the ways you can get about it. And it's to recognize that at the start of the puzzle, we might have had a situation like this, where the 3 could get all the way over to the 3rd column and still be visible. But once we have a 1 and 2 above it in this space, it's very much the case that the 3 seen from the left has to be here, that the only other options for these cells are too big for the space. And so if this were a 1 and then a 4, or a 1 and then a 5, that would not be working. So whichever of these cells is the 1, the 3 is right next to it. And that means down here at the bottom, this digit has to be a 4. It can't be a 3. And that's going to feed all of these digits around the grid through the rest of those cells. There's not as much we can immediately force right above, but we can clean out the puzzle by looking at the remaining spaces. There's only 1 digit that's left as an option for this lower right cell. Eliminations from around force these. This 4 clue on the top has to see a 4 before the 5, so this option would hide the 4, this option shows the 4, and once we put that in, all the remaining columns are going to come from the digits we are placing, leaving just 1 option, and we finish this variation of the puzzle. It's a pretty tricky puzzle for the Monday, but again, just as you really think about the variation, what it means for the rules, and take that forward from there. If you haven't found the secret for the whole week yet, you may want to stop the video now. Otherwise, I'll give you a little bit of the Easter egg for this puzzle as well as the whole week. And that's to say that while all the puzzles in this week were variations, There's another way they can be solved, and that's to just ignore the variation side. So let's think about if this were just a skyscraper. We're already set in this interface to try to solve a puzzle as this basic skyscraper. Some of the things to do with basic skyscrapers are to start from the largest digits first, and a cell like this, which is 4 away from the bottom and 2 away from the top, must be a 5. In this top row, a 5 has to be at least 3 cells away from the right side, but it can't be near one of these clues, so we get a 5 down here. The 5 has to be in these cells because of the 3's on the the left side, but the 4 up here forces the 5 to actually be here and here. Get a last 5 in this corner. A 5 all the way away from a 2 cell will always force the 4 to be right next to it so that all the other buildings are hidden in that space. 2 of the clues that are really key in a small skyscrapers like this are these 4 clues, particularly when we place these 5s, we get a step ladder where there are 2 options for each cell, but they're always strictly increasing, 1 to 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, same thing over here. Once we actually have placed the 4 in this upper left cell, though, that forces a 4 in this cell, which will complete this rightmost column quite quickly. It's going to actually give us a limited set of options here, as we just marked in. We have sort of these along the top. That gives us that there is a big 1 on the bottom down here. Get these spaces. We get that there is a 4 somewhere in these cells. I'll actually go to another color for this because I think this is a key thing in the puzzle to see. There's also a 4 up here, but that's not going to be as critical. Why is this 4 important? Well, this 4 is going to be in a scene cell, so it's definitely a building we see. And this is a building we see, and this is a building we see. And so these should be the 3 cells that are visible. And we can't take a cell like this one, which I'm now marking in blue, and see that cell. So blue has to be hidden, and if blue has to be hidden, the value that goes into this cell here that I'm clicking on has to be larger than the one to the right. And if a 2 or 3 goes in there and a 4 is further in the row, this must be a 3. That gives a 2. That gives this space of digits coming in. These are now just placed based on the remaining options in the row. And we actually have finished a puzzle. This won't mark it as correct because, again, this was the Easter egg for the week. But all the puzzles here had 2 solutions, one using the normal meaning of the rules and one using the varied meaning of the rules. So I hope you learned a little bit something about skyscrapers as well as the variation Haido. Hope you really enjoyed the week, and we'll see you again soon.